Welcome back to Ghost Pirate Entertainment. I'm your host, Kanan Becker, and today we talk about the best cosmic horror movies of all time. So Lovecraftian horror movies or cosmic horror movies are my favorite subgenre in horror. And it's kind of a tricky subgenre because it's not really cut and dry exactly what is a cosmic horror movie. So with that in mind, this is my list. This is what I consider to be cosmic horror movies, as well as what my favorites are. Not even saying these are the best movies, but just what my favorites are. And with that, let's get to the list! Phantoms is a 1998 sci-fi horror movie, directed by Joe Chappelle and adapted from Dean Koontz' 1983 novel of the same name. It stars Rose McGowan, Liv Schreiber, Ben Affleck, and Peter O'Toole. In the peaceful town of Snowfield, Colorado, something evil has wiped out the community, and now it's up to a group of people to stop it, or at least get out of Snowfield alive.
The first thing we need to know is what we're dealing with here. What kind of threat it is. Biological, chemical, or other.
Well, I'm leaning toward other.
So kicking this list off, I wanted to talk about Phantoms. It's one of my personal favorites, especially from that era, and a movie that really is kind of overlooked. And I've heard over the years from a lot of people that the book is better, but I still really enjoy the movie. I think it's a great time. In a lot of ways, it's kind of a time capsule of the end of the 90s, and this young cast of actors who would go on to have successful careers. But my favorite part of this movie, my favorite element of it, is what I love so much about cosmic horror. And I'm not saying this is a perfect movie, but the way it deals with the mystery of it all. That unknown void, that thing that exists, that unknown energy, that unknown element that's just beyond our understanding. I love that element so much in stories. It's one of those things that creeps me out the most. And I felt like this captured that really well. I love the look, the style, and the pacing of it. It just has a great energy and mood about it. It's an entertaining movie and one that I definitely think deserves my number 10 spot. Color Out of Space is a 2019 sci-fi horror movie, directed by Richard Stanley and based on the short story The Color Out of Space by H.P. Lovecraft. It stars Nicolas Cage, Jolie Richardson, and Madeline Arthur. After a meteorite lands on the front yard of their farm, Nathan Gardner and his family find themselves battling a mutant extraterrestrial organism that infects their minds and bodies, transforming their quiet rural life into a technicolor nightmare.
Then everything just blew up.
This one really caught me off guard when it came out because it was so much better than I expected. It went straight to Shudder and it starred Nicolas Cage, and at the time he was just doing basically anything and everything, and most of the movies he was doing were not very good. He's now had a renaissance and now we're more appreciative and happy and excited to see him in movies, but at the time it was almost like a death sentence. It was almost like, oh, if Nicolas Cage is in it, it's probably going to be bad. And not only is it good, it's one of my favorites, as you can see, for cosmic horror. I feel like it captures it so well, especially visually. Just this haunting way that this alien parasite transforms their lives, and the scenery and the landscape. It's just haunting and terrifying in a really fun, imaginative way. I also really love the visuals in this. The color palette that's used, it's fun and bright and yet haunting and intimidating. And Nicolas Cage is fantastic in this movie. He goes Nicolas Cage at one point, but not so much that it takes you out of the movie. He actually plays this father really well, and the turmoil and all of the things that this poor guy goes through. It's really awful, but entertaining. And I just think this is a real gem in the cosmic horror landscape. Underwater is a 2020 sci-fi horror movie. Directed by William Eubank, it stars Kristen Stewart, Vincent Castle, and Jessica Henwick. A crew of oceanic researchers working for a deep-sea drilling company try to get to safety after a mysterious earthquake devastates their deep water facility.
On a scale from 1 to 10, how bad's my rig?
10. We drilled to the bottom of the ocean, and we don't know what came out.
This movie is so badass, and it's gotten some love, but in a lot of ways, sadly, because of 2020 and everything that happened, a lot of movies were kind of lost in the shuffle and didn't really get the love that they deserve. And this is one of the ones that I felt like in some ways has fallen through the cracks. And if you haven't seen this, you might be wondering, well, how is this a cosmic horror movie? And since I don't really spoil movies, I can't really say. But there is an element of unknown that is just jaw-dropping in this film, because this whole movie has this creepy sense of being out of your element. You can really feel the weight of water. You can really feel being at the bottom of the ocean in this, and everything being totally dark and not having any idea what's around you. And as it goes, things escalate, and you start to little by little discover that there's things out there that you're not aware of, things that are beyond your purview, and the more you do see, the more terrifying that element becomes. I also think Kristen Stewart is fantastic in this. This is one of my favorite performances from her. She's just truly a badass in this. And I have heard it said that this is basically Alien underwater, and I'm not going to say that that's totally off base, but there are some elements to me that make this unique and stand alone, and especially when it comes to the way this deals with that unknown and the horrifying nature of that. This is one of my favorite horror movies from the last 10 years, but especially when it comes to cosmic horror.
This isn't the end.
The Void is a 2016 Canadian horror movie, written and directed by Stephen Kostanski and Jeremy Gillespie. It stars Aaron Poole, Kathleen Monroe, and Ellen Wong. Shortly after delivering a patient to an understaffed hospital, a police officer experiences strange and violent occurrences, seemingly linked to a group of mysterious hooded figures. This is one of the more dark, creepy, uncomfortable cosmic horror movies we've seen in quite a while. And the fact that it has such a small budget just blows my mind. I wish we would get more movies like this. It is just so uncomfortable and disturbing when cosmic horror is done right. And so much of this is done practically, and there's a lot of cool body horror, monster visuals, just things that'll definitely give you nightmares in this. It gets goopy and ooey gooey and gross, but it's imaginative and creative. I think this movie is fantastic, and it is very underrated. And so if you're one of those out there that have yet to see this one, and you're a fan of cosmic horror, you definitely need to check this one out.
Who she's gonna sacrifice to make it all better?
We want the Void.
You try it.
Kill him!
The Mist is a 2007 sci-fi horror movie, directed by Frank Darabont and based on the 1980 novella The Mist by Stephen King. It stars Thomas Jane, Laurie Holden, and Marissa Gay Harden. A freak storm unleashes a species of bloodthirsty creatures on a small town, where a small band of citizens hole up in a supermarket and must fight for their lives.
What's going on?
It's death.
This is such a cool movie. The creature designs, the way it looks, the tension that's built, the mysterious quality, just that whole unknown thing once again is dealt with and done so well in this one. Because the claustrophobia is so overwhelming in this, because you just know that there's these creatures because you see some of them, but then there's a whole lot you don't see. And as the movie develops, you start to see more and more, but even then, there's this much bigger mystery, this much bigger element that you feel like is out there that you just can't quite see. And beyond that, this has one of the darkest, most twisted endings you'll ever see. But if you're a fan of cosmic horror, I don't think there's anything to not love about this movie.
It's making something new.
Annihilation is a 2018 psychological sci-fi horror movie, written and directed by Alex Garland. It stars Natalie Portman, Jennifer Jason Leigh, and Gina Rodriguez. The story follows a group of explorers who enter the Shimmer, a mysterious quarantine zone of mutating plants and animals caused by an alien presence.
It's something they termed the Shimmer. We've sent in drones and teams of people, but nothing comes back.
But something has.
This to me is such a masterpiece. It's one of the best sci-fi horror movies, in my opinion, done in the last 20 years. Because not only does it have an incredible cast who perform amazing in this, but the way the whole story unfolds, just that, once again, that mysterious quality and the way that that's dealt with, the way that it's shown, the visuals you see, it starts out pretty subtle, and then as things go, it builds and builds and becomes more and more just overwhelming and terrifying, to be honest. And every time you feel like you have an answer to a question, you're also presented with another question. Because even the most terrifying entities in this are still grounded in reality, and I feel like that's one of the things that really jumps off the screen in this. Just adds to that believable mystery in this film. But I'm also just a big fan of the way Alex Garland creates movies. There's just always this sense of wonder and mystery and creativity in his films. To me, this is a work of film art and definitely deserves a spot on this list.
I know this book will drive people crazy. Let's hope so. The movie comes out next month.
In the Mouth of Madness is a 1994 supernatural horror movie, directed and scored by John Carpenter. It stars Sam Neill, Julie Carmen, and Jorgen Prichnow. It tells the story of John Trent, an insurance investigator who visits a small town while looking into the disappearance of a successful author, and he begins to question his sanity as the lines between reality and fiction begin to blur.
It's a setup. I just have to work out how it's set up.
Kane's writing has been known to have an effect on his readers.
So this has been one of my favorite movies ever since I first saw this when I rented it at Hollywood Video. Unfortunately, I didn't get to see this in theaters. It's one of my bucket list movies that I would love to see in a theater one day, but even still, just watching it, knowing nothing about it, I was just blown away by the mystery of this, by that sense of the unknown, that dark void, that thing you just cannot get your head around. I just love that element so much, and when it's done right, like I said earlier, it's amazing. And this movie does that so well. It just leaves you questioning what is reality, and even when this movie's over, you're still kind of mulling it over and trying to figure out what you just watched and what is the reality of what you saw. The visuals are great and disturbing and uncomfortable. This movie is really a masterpiece and one of my absolute favorite John Carpenter movies for sure. This is such an unnerving, creepy, atmospheric good time and definitely a classic. Hellraiser is a 1987 supernatural horror movie, written and directed by Clive Barker. It stars Ashley Lawrence, Claire Higgins, and Doug Bradley. A woman discovers a newly resurrected, partially formed body of her brother-in-law and begins killing for him to revitalize his body so he can escape the demonic beings that are pursuing him. I have such cool memories with this movie because, for one, my very first tattoo, this right here, I actually was getting it by an airman on an Air Force base when I was like 16, 17 years old. That was my first tattoo. And while we were doing that, or he was doing it, we were watching Hellraiser, and it was my first time experiencing that movie and the gore and the uncomfortable qualities. And once again, that mysterious unknown thing just terrified me, to be honest. Like, this movie really scarred me physically and mentally at the time, and I'll never forget that. But Clive Barker is truly just the master of that element in his writing and in his movies. Just that mysterious unknown, those things that lurk in the shadows. He just has such a beautiful way of bringing that into the light and just bringing it into reality. It's just terrifying, but also fascinating and alluring in many ways. On top of that, the visuals, the way the Cenobites look, just especially at the time. I mean, if you're someone now seeing it for the first time, you may not be quite as blown away. But for us back in the day, seeing this for the first time, it was just jaw-dropping. It really was terrifying and made you just so uncomfortable, and yet you couldn't look away. So when I was putting this list together, I knew for a fact Hellraiser was going to be near the top. The Thing is a 1982 sci-fi horror movie, directed by John Carpenter and based on the 1938 John W. Campbell novella, Who Goes There? It stars Kurt Russell, Keith David, and Wilford Brimley. It tells the story of a group of American researchers in Antarctica who encounter a parasitic extraterrestrial life form.
This thing doesn't want to show itself. It wants to hide inside an imitation. It'll fight if it has to, but it's vulnerable out in the open.
So I've said it numerous times whenever I've talked about this movie on this channel that I consider this to be the greatest horror movie ever made. And I still feel that way, even though this is my number 2 pick on here. It's not my number 1. I'll talk about that one in a minute. But as far as cosmic horror movies go, I felt like there was one just barely above it. But this movie still is just haunting in so many different ways. The thing that really stands out about this one is just the visuals, the special effects, the practical effects. They're just so cool, and even to this day hold up so well. But once again, that sense of the unknown, what really makes cosmic Lovecraftian horror so special, is just palpable in this. You could just feel it on every character in this, in every line that they deliver. Because they never know who may be infected next, and they never know what it is they're even dealing with, what all this creature can even do. What they do know is that it's taking over each other, and it could take over them at any moment. So almost like a disease, yet one that can walk and talk and think and make decisions. It's just a terrifying concept, and it's so well executed by John Carpenter. It doesn't matter how many times I've seen this, it never gets old. It is always just a breathtaking, exciting, fun experience to watch this movie.
She won't let you.
God help us.
Event Horizon is a 1997 sci-fi horror movie, directed by Paul W.S. Anderson and written by Philip Eisner. It stars Lawrence Fishburne, Sam Neill, and Julie Richardson. Set in 2047, it follows a crew of astronauts who are sent on a rescue mission after a missing spaceship, the Event Horizon, which spontaneously reappears orbiting near Neptune.
The ship doesn't really go faster than light. What it does is it creates a dimensional gateway that allows it to jump instantaneously from one point of the universe to another light years away.
Okay, so I can just hear you guys right now in the comments telling me there is no way this is number 1, that I'm an idiot, and yada, yada, yada. Right, I get it. The movies below this, at least a couple of them, are better movies. I'm not even gonna argue that they're better. But when it comes to cosmic horror, and the thing that makes a movie a cosmic horror, and this is just in my opinion, I feel like there's nothing that's ever done it better than Event Horizon. It's so dark and bleak and mysterious and uncomfortable. Just the way it shows this being and what is this unknown thing out there that even at the end of this movie, you're still questioning what that it even is. Is it hell? Is it another universe? I mean, what exactly it is? And what's so amazing in me about it, and so creepy and uncomfortable, is the fact that it doesn't really explain it, and it leaves you with that mystery. Because truly, in the cosmic sense, That's the thing that none of us can explain, that none of us can really put a finger on. That's what makes it cosmic horror. Because by definition, cosmic horror or Lovecraftian horror or Eldritch horror, it's about the unknowable, about the incomprehensible, those things that terrify us at night when we're trying to fall asleep, that scared us back when we were just cavemen huddled around a fire because we just didn't know what was in the dark around us, those things that just lurked out in the shadows. And those will always exist. It's in our DNA, it's in who we are. And it's what I love so much about cosmic horror. And to me, this movie captures that as good or better than anything that's ever been done. The visuals, the atmosphere, the lighting, everything about this movie just really screams that element, the violence of it, the gory quality, the sick and twisted. And like I said, I'm not saying it's the best movie. It does have flaws, it does have holes. Some of the special effects don't quite hold up, this and that, but that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about what is my favorite and why. On top of that, when this movie came out, it haunted me and stuck with me for weeks and weeks after seeing it. And it's one of those movies I've gone back to over and over whenever anyone has asked me what movie got under my skin, what movie really creeped me out. Because this goes beyond being scared. It's one of those movies that just sticks with you, gets under your skin, and that you just can't get rid of. But with that being said, it's my number one pick, my favorite cosmic horror movie. But I would love to hear down in the comments, what are your favorites? What are the movies you think I missed? What are the movies that you agree with? Either way, I just want to hear what your thoughts are down there. But like always, thank you so much for watching this. And if you enjoyed this, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button and ding that little bell, because that is the best way to keep track of this channel. And when I post videos like this, and I post videos like this every single week, I also want to give a huge, massive, enormous thank you to the Ghost Pirate crew, to you guys over on Patreon, and to the channel members over here. You guys absolutely mean the world to me. And if you would like to help support this channel over on Patreon, there's a link down in the description. Or if you want to become a channel member and help support the channel that way, there's a button right down there that says join. But like always, thank you so much for watching. Please crush that like button. And remember, guys, horror can be fun. And if you enjoyed this, click right here to watch me talk about 10 more movies that I think you definitely need